the director of the SPAFA, even though he's not live with us, and I hope that he's still in the, have a chance to listen later, and all the online participants and also the staff that who make this series come true. So first, before we talk, I would like to acknowledge all the SPAFA director staff and Professor Miriam Stark, Michelle Heckman, Francis Hayashida, and John Robb and John Joyce White, who engaged in the discussion and the debate about the basic archaeological work, archaeological data, theory, and methodology with me over many years. And my archaeological student, from Silpakorn University, from Malaysia, from Philippines, and Laos, who always make me try to answer the difficult question in the class and force me to find a teaching method that can help them understand archaeology and the application of the theoretical concept in archaeological work. And also, our ethnic brother and sister who changed my working perspective and make me put archaeological ego aside and become a student once again. So this topic of the discussion is very important for the archaeological work in Southeast Asian region, and it is very close to my heart. It is something that we need to review the status of the archaeological research in our region. So today's lecture, I would like to reflect from the perspective of my own personal experience of teaching and also conducting research over nearly 4 decades. I may not have a of academic paper relate to the theory and, in our region in supporting my point and position. This is to inform everyone about the kind of like how I do the data analysis and synthesis, so we can beneficial for the new archaeological research, especially the new generation who start their career path. Well, let me go back a little bit, almost 45 years ago when I was a graduate student studying at Silpakorn University. I didn't know the term theoretical concept at all. It wasn't until my 4th year that I read an English article by Professor Carl Hatterer. Actually, when Professor Miriam Stark and I, we prepare our talk, we share the similar kind of like, inspiration. I read Professor Carl Hatterer in Current Anthropology, published in 1976, entitled An Evolutionary Approach to the Southeast Asian Cultural Sequence. My professor, Potomura Getatat, who was a classmate of Bong Dizon, who he is just like a brother to me, who went to study at the University of Pennsylvania under Dr. Chester Gorman, guided me in the writing of my undergrad honor thesis on the analysis of the stone tool found along the Mekong River in Chiang Rai Province. After that, I start to wonder and want to know more about the origin of the kind of like, the theory and method, how it works. After that, I worked as a member of the fine art department for over a year, and then I thought that I should pursue further study because I want to learn different way of thinking and work in that differ from my previous experience. My period experience is the hard art historical approach. So when I went to study master and doctoral degree at the University of Michigan, and I have a culture shock. And I think that the thing that I have to refer to this, I think that if some of you are the student, don't be shocked with the theory, because I have been, have a culture shock before. It's very severe because I have as I told you, I have the art historical approach. And there I have to following the anthropological approach, which I have no prior knowledge at all. So that is a kind of like, very difficult. But anyway, I finished. And after graduate, I finished by applying the theory in my research. And when I came back, teaching at Silpakorn University, I put the theory and method, course in the master and PhD program, you know. So that what happened. And I start working in Maehoson province. What happened is like I cannot use my theory at all that I developed from Kanchanaburi. It's uh, that that kind of like framework, theoretical framework. I use the mobility organization. And when I start working on my research in Northwest Thailand, I cannot use it at all. So will be something that, uh, we as an archaeology, we have theory, and then when you work in the field itself, you don't have a good data. So basically, you have to start doing the basic research, doing the chronology. So I start with the cultural historical approach to construct the chronology of my site first. For almost 10 years, I start to go back and apply the theory. So I work back and forth between data and theory. So this talk will explore the historical trajectory, current challenge, and the future direction for archaeological theory in Southeast Asia. Emphasize the need for critical self-reflection, ethical engagement, indigenous and local innovation. So the grounding for this discussion, even though it's from my practical fieldwork and research experience, that also highlight my world, my real world challenge from my research. And it's the lesson with unwritten in the textbook that I will share with you. So the key point that I would like to talk here, I would like to address 4 points. Why do we need theory? A number of my colleagues say that we don't need, theory. We just do archaeology. This is really true. Will be something that I want to talk about. And I would like to also talk about the research background and perception of the past, within Southeast Asia, based on the historical trajectory and the contemporary challenge, which is the critical gap in Southeast Asian archaeology. And finally, I will, talk about the forging the new path. What should we do? And along the way, I might have to touch upon a little bit on the methodology. I don't mean to cross, the boundary to Professor Miriam talk, but at least somehow, these two is relate to one another. Okay, so why do we need theory? Because I think that the practical application of the theoretical concept will lead to the methodology and the field technique for us as an archaeologist to predict, collect, analyze, and interpret the plausible of the past. That's why I think that we need it. So this is something that, so over the past several decades, Southeast Asian archaeology has been seeing significant development in theoretical concept and methodology, over how many, decades. We adapt to the global economic and social change. This is what we use the theory. And the Southeast Asian archaeologists specifically, integrate both conceptual tool and technical method, often borrow from other discipline for the interpretation. So now is more, you see more variety, diverse, and very advanced methodology that apply in Southeast Asian archaeology. The common research methodology thread among the many generations of Southeast Asian archaeologists is the concept of chronological order with diagnostic type of artifacts and cultural historical approach. This is the example of the, like uh, uh, Austronesian migration, origin of Austronesian, and we look at the pottery style, of the decorative style, something like that. So this is still a main and major kind of like a theoretical approach and also methodology that we see in our region. This is just the example that what, even you say that we don't need theory, but we use theory and it's control our methodology. So now let's look at the research, background or cultural background and perception of the past. Before we go to that, let's look at the why Southeast Asian is an important research area. Because the background of this area is a unique environmental adaptation. It's tropical environment, it's diverse. We see the diverse pathway of the social complexity. And we see the complex interaction of the local innovation and external influence from outside. And also, we see the significant maritime network. This is just a example that I choose, many, kind of like aspect of why Southeast Asian is important. I just narrow down just to, give a key point. Okay. So, let's look at the unique environmental adaptation. This is the tropical environment, which is rainforest, it's tropical savanna, it's seasonal tropic. It's have a lot of diverse river system and coastline, and also this is it's a challenge and opportunity for a study of the human adaptation. So we know that we have the evidence of the different human species, and migration. It's contribute to the world kind of like, global issue on the human adaptation and the human evolution. Particularly, because like we have a debate whether the human can exist in the tropical environment. So this is very unique. And even in the empire or state formation, this whole area is the key environmental kind of like, adaptation as well. So the second one is the sample of the diverse pathway to the complex society. The Southeast Asia offer the multiple, often non-linear trajectory to the complex society that challenge the Western centric model of the state formation that, that is like, for instance, like Sriwijaya is not the centralized control, political unit. And this is very interesting to, to use as a comparative case to compare with other sites in the world. Or recent work by my colleague Udamlak Kuntagun that she challenged the highland, inland, and highland polity that, somehow people ignore the area that is periphery region, and she think that this is the area like this. It could be the crossroad for the inter exchange, within inland, and that is, I think this is just an example of the pathway of the complex society that is not just like, uh social hierarchy that we just see one way, in the linear form. The action of the local innovation and the external influence. I'm sorry that I just used the case in mainland Southeast Asia because it's just a limited of time. That is my excuse. But for instance, we over the decade of the winds pickup, the Thai Pennsylvania archaeological methodology, and later Oliver Price worked on this. We pinned down the sources and also the production kind of like a site in mainland Southeast Asia, in Laos, Vietnam, and also in Thailand. So we know that, what is the local, even though you have the knowledge from outside, but you can see the development, the production that is locally developed. And at the same time, this is the sample from my site in Mae Hong Son. We can also see the external kind of like influence in the lacquer production in our region. So in the number of site, we start to see the local innovation and also the external, and it's locally adapt later, which is important because we need to really understand. I don't care about the what is when is the origin of the something, but it's more important to understand that how it's developed and diverse later. Okay, the fourth one is the maritime network. I think the discover from the shipwreck at the Phnom Surin that have technology that striking difference from the one that we know in the UTR, and it's very to the technology from Arab or Middle East. This is something that is kind of new knowledge. And later on, in the Ayutthaya period or even Sivijay period, we start to see more evidence of the shipwreck, which is help us understand more about the maritime network and also, the trade and also population movement, in the different historical period. So this is the why this area is important. So it is an area that contributes to the understanding of the human history, comparable to the other region of the world. So okay. Okay, so when we look at the background of the archaeology that we have conducted by the local archaeologists and also foreign archaeologists, we see like I just briefly kind of like summarize the whole idea. We work on the method, theory, and new empirical data. This is the stage that we know. But when I review the work, and I can give the example of Thailand, for example, we tend to look at the local development or the cultural history of within our region and address the issue within the region. And somehow, sometimes the politician or the government have a nationalistic agenda based on our archaeological evidence, that we discover. Whereas, the foreign archaeologists tend to look at the different lens from the global development, global cultural history, what happened within this region and link to the global network, something like that, or theoretical framework that it can explain the similar thing in this region and compare with other part of the world. So that is somehow, this is the background or perception of doing archaeology that's slightly different between local Southeast Asia and also foreign archaeologists. And its significance because it will lead the way that how we select the theory or no theory or methodology in our work. Okay. So now let's look at the contemporary challenge. I like to go, quickly because so we can have time to really discuss and, answer the QA question. Okay. So, as I mentioned, I didn't lay out that the history of the archaeology in our region, but to summarize before I talking about the gap, I think that the archaeological in Southeast Asia heavily influenced, whether we like it or not, by Western, especially European and later American tradition since the colonial period, so for instance, like, construct the 3H system, cultural history, the chronology of the historical period or something like that. This is the framework that is related to the cultural historical framework. And the early work, often focus on the cultural history, typology, monumental architecture, uh, and now in the past, it might serve, in some case, colonial agenda, but now it serves the nationalist agenda. So this is the background. And after the post-World War, we tend to see World War II, we tend to see the diverse theoretical and systematic technique. And now, even post-COVID, I think that we get more advanced technology, such as the DNA analysis, isotope analysis, strontium analysis. This is for human bone and LiDAR, remote sensing, and so on. And we have seen more collaborative project, in this stage of my life now. And so let's look at the critical gap in Southeast Asia. There are so many, but I just kind of like select only 2 points. The first one is the dominance of the Western theoretical framework and the need for indigenous framework. And the second one is the theoretical and methodological integration with the interpretation. Somehow it separate, in many cases it's separate. So, okay. First, we look at the dominance of the Western theoretical framework and the need for indigenous framework. So we have to accept that, we still in the kind of like colonial legacy, that much of early Southeast Asian archaeology was shaped by the European colonial perception, leading to the interpretation of the often influenced by the Eurocentric lens. As I mentioned, before, that 3H system state formation is have to be hierarchical society. Complex society is have to be hierarchical society, centralized control, state happen because of trade, water management control, something like that. This result in the bias and exoticization of the culture and also a tendency to overlook the local perspective and the knowledge system, in our region. And also the term Indianization, Sinanization debate. Why the influence of Southeast Asian and Chinese culture is undeniable. I forget Southeast. I just saw it, yeah. And early theoretical often presents Southeast Asian as a passive recipient of external civilization, even though, it had, during 1960, when the Hawaiian team tried to change this kind of perception, I think that it's come back strongly, especially, when we have the DNA analysis kind of like, methodology that talking about the migration, uh, and the all the DNA interpretation is lean toward the migration and the demic culture diffusion from the north, which is China. So and the lack of indigenous theoretical voice I have mentioned earlier, the developing, we need to develop the approach that are specifically tailored to the unique socio-culture and historical context of Southeast Asian, such as Mandela. I will talk about it in the following topic. And also we recognize, that under theorized aspect of everyday life, more theoretical work need to understand the everyday life of the past population beyond the monumental architecture or elite culture, especially in the historical period. So the work such as like Alison Carter on the domestic space during the Angkor period, I think that it is very important because now we tend to focus on the everyday life, common people, but that is still very, very, very few work. Okay, so I'm sorry, Miriam, I have to talk about the methodology as well. So the theoretical and methodological integration with the interpretation, I find that, there is disconnect between theoretical practice, theory and practice. While the advanced scientific methodology, radiocarbon, botanical, remote sensing, LIDAR, DNA are increasingly adopted, and everyone now, I think that Fresher used the LIDAR over, 20 years, 15 years ago. Now everyone wants to use the LIDAR. Do we need all the LIDAR for the work? No. But we have to have a good question that, that and theoretical, framework that relate to how you use those kind of methodology. I find that there is a critical gap. Is in fully integrating this method with the robust theoretical framework for the interpretation. This is our critical gap as well. And the focus that on the chronology and material culture, I think that why establishing chronology and classify the material culture is fundamental for us. There is a tendency for research to be heavily descriptive without sufficient theoretical engagement to address the broader question of the social, economic, political organization or, environmental change. It's need to integrate, within the framework of chronology and material culture. I think that it cannot live without one another. And another thing that um, find is the limitation of the current interpretive model. The existing model or theory often derive from the Western archaeological tradition, such as the neo-evolutionary framework for the emergence of the complex society and the diffusion model, or migration model is come back strongly. It may not fully capture the unique character of the Southeast Asian society. So that is the kind of like, the gap that I found, and Professor Miriam might fill in something that I missing from my talk. Okay. So forging the new path, where should we go from here? And I just select only two um, only a few points, First of all, I think that we need to decolonization of the archaeological thought. We need to critically examine and challenging the inherited bias, and develop more inclusive, local relevance theoretical framework. We need to look for that and see what is applicable for our work. And the integration of theory and advanced methodologies, we need to move beyond the data collection. We do a lot of, we have a very sophisticated data collection, but we need to do more sophisticated and theoretical informed interpretation. We need to add theory in with the methodology. So this is the example of the integrated theory and advanced methodology. My work later on, I integrate natural science, humanity, applied science, social science into my work. So my work is carry on not only the Pleistocene period, but it's carry out to the contemporary society. So it needs a different set of theory from the different field, and it's need to integrate different period. You might apply the different theoretical framework. This is the example that I propose. And also, I mentioned earlier that we need to develop the indigenous theoretical perspective by fostering the theoretical that contribute from Southeast Asian scholar that reflect the unique character of the region. Like, for instance, that a number of people use the Mandela model, or the concept, the Buddhist philosophy of the impermanent in understand the change that happened to Southeast Asian heritage management by Anna Castro. And we also addressing under the theorizing aspect of human life beyond especially the historical period. I think that we need to expand beyond the monumental site to understand everyday life, practice social dynamic, human and environment interaction more holistically. For the Paleolithic, I think we need to move beyond technological aspect as well. We need to look at other, aspect, like subsistence economy, social organization, things like that, or even the human environment interaction. And also, we need to enhance the collaboration and knowledge sharing among Southeast Asian archaeologists, both foreign and also the local archaeologists. I have been talking about this for a long time because the problem is also the language. So we need to overcoming linguistic and institutional barrier to foster a more interconnect and theoretically rich archaeological community in Southeast Asia. We move, I think that we kind of like move on, but still it's go very slow. Okay. Uh, so okay. All right. So the final thought, I think that the critical reflexivity among scholar or archaeologists is important because it's foster the self-awareness about the researcher positioning, funding, assumption to approve the knowledge quality and integrity. This point, emphasize that the archaeologists, whether local or foreign, need to constantly examine their own bias, perspective and external factor that might influence their research. It is about understanding how archaeologists' background shape the question that we ask, the data that we collect, and the interpretation that we make. This is just not about the ethical imperative. It direct impact, the objectivity and the comprehensiveness of the knowledge that we produce. So in conclusion, well, I have critical reflection on the historical legacy combined with applicable theory and expand the understanding of methodology and the challenge of the specific regional characteristic and eliminate this gap. Although I didn't give the precise example on my work, but this is because of my work, throughout many decades, is helped me to have a self-reflexivity to analyze my own bias and use, between like theory and method, like back and forth along the way from the early stage of my career until like the present. And the past forward that involved the embracing, I state decolonization in terms of every country. We need to really, foster the critical reflexivity among us, building the genuine ethical partnership with the local community as well. Although I didn't talk about it that much, but it's so important. And also cultivating indigenous theoretical perspective. And this collaborative approach will lead more new and inclusive, global, impactful, understand Southeast Asian rich and complete past. So thank you. And the final picture. This is I talk lately to a number of my colleagues who are theorists, and we come into the conclusion, myself as well, that theory, methodology, and technique always change through time. But data, will exist over 100,000 years. So what we need in Southeast Asia, not only the suggestion that I gave, I think that we need to do a good research that produce a good data that accessible for comparative study throughout the region. And then we can work back and forth between theory and methodology again, but we need a good data for our region as well. Thank you.